On to other developing stories, the Gauteng Department of Education has lost the case against Oeverval High School, and the North Gauteng High Court has set aside the instruction to admit 55 additional English-speaking learners in the school. Judge Prinsloo ruled that there is no proof of available seats in School Oeverval. He says the learners can be admitted at the neighboring schools that do have the capacity and were possibly forced to state otherwise. And the court says the Education Department acted outside its powers in instructing the school to admit the extra learners.
The conclusion of the experts is formulated as follows. Taking into consideration that the school currently accommodates 612 high school children, the total space needed for these children, we highly recommend that no more children must be enrolled or allowed. Furthermore, if you take the risks involved in overpopulation in the school, it will be in the best interest of the school and the students not to overpopulate the school. Our professional opinion of the specific school is to keep the numbers as it is. Where a school uses the language of learning and teaching not chosen by the learner, the school is not compelled to admit the learner. Language remains a relevant factor to be taken into account for purposes of admission and cannot simply be ignored. The department cannot negate this aspect and cannot ride roughshod over the language policy of the school in the manner which the department seeks to do, in this case, by merely instructing the principal of the school to admit further English-speaking learners, thereby forcing the school to change to an medium policy.
And the ruling angered parents present in court who called for the school to be burnt down. Calling for calm, Gauteng Education MEC Panyaza Lesofi says they will appeal the ruling.
Even if this matter can go to the Constitutional Court, let the Constitutional Court legalize racism in our place. Let the Constitutional Court say that we are wrong in requesting our children just to study, sing, and dance together. We're not asking for anything. No. They say, let our children sing, dance, and study together. If that is unlawful, let someone come and tell us why.
Nobody wins when there's confrontations on the sides. We do not want a one side versus another side scenario. So from our side, we really do not want the confrontation. We would have to place the necessary, make the necessary arrangements if there would be some sort of engagement or confrontation from the members. But it must be stressed that the school will not be anticipating one, and nor would they even try and flame the emotions on. They would try and be fact-based and based on evidence. So it's unfortunate, but if we have no choice, we would have to try and protect the school and its learners on the first. The allegations come quick and fast, and they have been describing instances of racism right through the papers. It has been alluded to in the media. So race has been brought by who? By the department, by the MSc. Race has been brought to the forefront. There's not one incident, racial incident, that they can show, not one racist conduct they can show. But that's a narrative that's being played. So we've been, in the papers we've dealt with some considerable detail to refute those, and again, refer to them as unfortunate, because what happens is it's an emotive issue, and it's actually exciting people up on this issue, which is non-existent.
The controversial ruling has evoked sharp responses on social media. McAleese posted saying that the school language policy mustn't supersede the constitution of the country and the right to access to education. And Dumi Sole tweeted saying the argument that there are other schools close by protects the status quo and must fall. Another tweet says that this case must go to the highest court. We will not lose hope when our kids are excluded and made a mockery of. And Van Pret says that it is not about race. You refuse to be taught in Afrikaans. I refuse to be taught in English. And why your rights different from mine? Another one says Hoërskool Oeverval should admit all students, but indicate that they use Afrikaans as a medium of communication. Then parents can decide if their children can study there. And Emma Mabusela observes that inclusive communities are not built on litigation. Forcing the school to accept learners will lead to their social exclusion, and there's other options to true transformation. And we're joined in studio by Re Matakanya, a National Association of School Governing Bodies General Secretary, and Professor Ramodukhwane Tabane is an educational expert. Volshea Khekwane is a National Black Business Caucus Chairperson, and Michael Matlala, Deputy Chairperson of Wolvertfall Transformation Communities. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. I just want to start with you with Re Matlala. What is going on at Wolvertfall? Is it a case of the community wanting, or the school wanting to preserve its language at all costs, including the denial of access to education to others?
Thanks to you, Cindy. Good evening to the viewers. Yes, what is happening is that the school wants to preserve the school to be Africa's medium of instruction. Basically, what is happening, you've got Overfall sitting between Solent Park and Falcon Ridge, where you've got feeder school, which is Solent Park Like School, who's supposed to feed the school. But unfortunately, because of language, English learners are not accepted in that school. But contrary to that is that most of the learners who are African speaking, they are not residing in that area. They are coming as far as Free State, because they are coming from Sasolburg, which is part of Free State. They are coming from Meyaton, they are coming from Three River. Are
they predominantly Afrikaans, white?
It's predominantly, yes, white. As they spoke at the court today, out of 148, only blacks are 8 who will be doing Afrikaans in that school.
Professor Tabane, can we just call it that it is blatant racism, and having the courts also in cahoots in a sense that they want to preserve the language of a minority over and above the interests of all learners?
Well, one needs to be very careful to talk about cahoots, Cindy. I guess it will be very important for us to get to the gist and to read the judgment. And if indeed it is found that it is about preservation of the few over the majority, then we have a problem. However, let's not forget that our constitution does give a right for the minorities as well to exist, and for the majority not to trample over the rights of the minorities as well. So it's a delicate balance that we have to play on and to know and to get to the gist of it.
Yeah, but aren't these artificial boundaries, in the sense that, as Re Matlala is saying, that not all the kids that are attending this particular school come from the radius or the prescription of you qualifying to be admitted in that school? As a matter of fact, there's only 8 black kids, and the majority being Afrikaans white.
There was a 2009 judgment, the Kamusaneke judgment, Constitutional Court of MLO, where the judgment was instructing the departments to timelessly put in place processes of changing the schools and making more spaces available for our learners. So from this, it might seem as if something somewhere it did not go wrong. Secondly, November last year, 2017, we as a community and as a public, we were asked to comment on the new Schools Act in terms of the powers of the SG, because it is SGB that determines the language policy. So we are waiting for that, for those comments and to be taken into consideration and see what comes into it. Of course, we know the SGB Alliance is against that. So it's a process.
Yeah, and that's where you come in as the National Association of School Governing Bodies, a General Secretary. Is this in Overfall a situation where almost the country is held to ransom? Because what happens in this case, there's now a precedent that any other school that doesn't want to change its language policy or accommodate other learners would refer to this particular case as a preamble, that you cannot just impose different languages in a school that has one language policy.
Thanks, Cindy, and good evening, all the South Africans. You are correct, Cindy, that firstly, I think Professor has indicated very clearly that there are laws in this country. One of those pieces of legislation is South African School Act that regulate schooling in South Africa, and it also gives the governing body power to determine some other policies, like, for instance, the language policy, the admission policy, and other policies. However, the powers of the school governing board also are regulated by provincial policies, provincial regulation, provincial laws, as well as national laws. And in our country, probably we have got the constitution that now superpowers all other laws in the country. Then it also talks about the access and of course, as much as we have the power to do that, but we cannot use a language to stop children from accessing education.
But the school governing body in Overval has done exactly that. So as the national overarching body, what are you going to assist in the frustrated families and parents in this particular area that Rematala has, as a personal experience, has told us that this is deliberate segregation based on language?
It is true. I mean, it is unfortunate that it has already been taken to court. Then we have to wait for the court to rule. The court has ruled, and the department has to take the next step. Probably is to go to the appeal and appeal that decision. And finally, it will end up in the constitution. But here, I think the parents are just playing around with our children. You know, I mean, 56 really. I mean, if you go to schools in the country, you will find that now schools that just have a limit number of, but they've exceeded that number to accommodate these children. I mean, for instance, you know, in Gauteng that we have got a problem of migration and all this. Then we cannot say those children must go back to their provinces and all those things because we are ruled by the constitution.
Okay, but there are other organizations as well, and one could argue that generally, systemically, it is very difficult for black people to access good quality health care. You can blame it on whether there is efficiency in government. But in the main, it's a continued struggle, be it fees must fall, be it now access to a particular school that previously didn't admit English-speaking as kids, especially black, that we're not able to interrogate these particular structures. Where are the parents imposing themselves in the SGB? Who decides the appointment of the school governing body directors or members?
That's a good point because I'm sure you're going to, however, that's a good point. I'm just going to say that because at the end of the day, it is us parents who are supposed to play an effective role in those particular schools. Unfortunately, with an Overval school, the SGB will be less black or non-existent because of the current situation now. However, the SGBs will be telling you that they are at pains in getting parents to participate in the SGB so that they can determine the admission policies in those schools.
Volsha, your view?
In South Africa, good evening to all listening and watching. In South Africa, there is an inherent behavior. There is a way that the white people in South Africa block black people from participating in things. Even the school governing body, Prof, with all due respect, you will find that it's very difficult to find yourself in that school governing body because there's an agenda around the whole school to make sure that school is for Afrikaners. Whether you go to that particular school or many other schools that have reasons and barriers, this issue of language is something that comes through from the apartheid era when they built monuments for the language and all this, because language carries culture. The Afrikaners did that. The monuments still stand in our country today, the Afrikaner monuments. And the reason for that is culture is carried by language. So when you demoralize other languages and keep one language as supreme, you know what you get? Go to any stop and go in this country. You will see a board written to be careful in English and Afrikaans. You'll never see a Tswana board, you'll never see a Pedi board, you'll never see a Zulu board, you'll always see. You fly into the country, I fly business class into the country, economy, whatever, you will hear your weather in English, Afrikaans, and the native language of that plane, where it comes from. If it's Emirates, it will be in Arabic, okay? You'll never hear Tswana, you'll never hear, because...
So how do we change that, though? I mean, 23 years going on, one caller earlier was talking about the need for I suppose, reload of the Truth and Reconciliation to deal with the racism, structural exclusion of people. Rematala, have you been, as a parent, participated, put your hand up to want to be a member of the school governing body in Overval, and what has your experience been?
Currently, we're not part of Overfall, but as a parent from Solon Park Lake School, I have participated at SGB. I've been a deputy for the last 2 terms, but however, maybe to concur with what the professor said, I think the challenge, even if not only on African school, even generally, parents don't participate on SGBs. That's the challenge that we are facing. Even if school can be predominantly black, parents are passive when it comes to, sometimes election can be postponed 3 times because parents will come from a quorum.
I don't know if it works differently in private schools, but now, at the top of my mind, I can't remember an invitation to participate in an SGB. There was a parent-teacher association that you participated in, but that quickly dwindled. So how do we impose ourselves and get involved more in the management and the governance of the schools our kids go to?
I think National Association of School Governing Bodies is spearheading that parents must come on board. They must be involved in the education of their children. We must also talk to these children, parental involvement. I mean, parenting and parental involvement, there are 2 programs. And the National Association of School Governing is really spearheading them. That, you see, the question of African parents not being involved in the education of the children is historic. And then we have to reverse that so that if they need quality learning and teaching in their schools, then parents must come on board and start. So you don't have to involve. Then when we call, then this time in March, then we are electing school governing bodies. But we don't just go and elect school governing bodies and leave them alone there. We must support them. We must come in board and involve us. Because you sometimes look, you remember the Pretoria girls case of the hair. I mean, if in June, then you start saying, no. Then it's a problem because when the policies are formulated, they are given to those parents. You must read them and oppose.
But that in itself is also a way of denying culture, as Walshe was saying, that language carries more than identity. It's about your genealogy, your nativity, who you are, where you come from, and that you'll pass on to the next generation. So when policies are made at school level and you are told you have to wear your hair tied back and not longer than a particular length or height, for that matter, in the case of black people, isn't that in itself also discriminatory and exclusive?
Yes, I mean, if you look at, there's such a lot of rhetoric around how black parents don't participate with their children and so on and so forth. We work with a lot of communities, and I can tell you that that's not necessarily the case. When the rules are being made by the school governing body, or they send the letters to the families, most of those letters are in English. If you go to Tembisa now, they get letters in English. And I can tell you, I was sitting there with a family when a letter came with a child. I can't remember what the topic was about. But the parents could not understand it. I had to translate to them and actually let them understand it. When you go to a school, like a private school, where you've got very educated parents who can afford to do certain things, you can send such a thing and they can read it and respond to it. When you send it to a village or to a location or places of that nature, you need to maybe call the parents and explain to them in their language of that area.
I understand about the consultative need, but let's just look at the current rules. In the classical case, the Pretoria school, with regarding to the Afro. One, we have 24th of September celebrating Heritage Day, and the rest of the year we're intolerant thereof. And this comes back to the very rules that seem so rigid and are not being interrogated, that they need to then transform to where current modern-day South Africa finds itself in the appreciation of the diversity of the nation we live in.
That's what the problem is, when programs are more celebratory rather than transformative. Because a transformative program, it means it's an everyday engagement. However, we don't get to do that. One can sit and try to shift the blame. The hair matter, even the mindset and the shift of who are constituting the governing body of that particular school. It's the most important factor. The fact that the MEC went to court and there was an opposition, it means a mandate was got, or they got a mandate from the SGB. Who is in that SGB? is the parents. So where are our parents to fight this? And now, as I indicated, that we were asked to comment on the new Basic Bills Act that is now coming. I wonder how much of us have indeed sat down and said, this is about language policy, it's about admission of learners into a particular school. The School Government Bodies Association, I know that they're against it, certain amendments that are to be made on that act, on the bill rather.
So Rematlala, you have the view that the court erred in its ruling, setting aside this matter, that the school cannot accommodate the learners. You have physically seen that there is adequate space and that the resources could be implemented there to accommodate the 55 learners.
Yes. When you listen to the judge, I think the judge has been selective on his pronouncement. The judge is saying overfall is full at 621. He's referring our kids to a school that is 1,005. So it's a contradiction on that. And the judge has never took into consideration issues of us staying walking distance, us being residents of that community, us being given preference, and also our kids, those 55 kids have applied in time in that school. And the school has been aware that these kids are coming because we've engaged the department since 2016 and the school was aware, hence we were insisting on 2017 and then they said we should postpone for 2018. But contrary to that, it's when the school now ran to court instead of implementing what has been expected.
Well, you could call it a judicial overreach, but nonetheless, the process is in place. It's sub judice, so we're going to have to wait for the appeal process before this matter can rest. But thank you indeed to our guest for engaging us. We have Rematlala Matakanya, National Association of School Governing Bodies General Secretary, and we have Professor Ramodungwane Tabane, Educational Expert, Volshek Hekwane, National Black Business Council Chairman, and Michael Matlala, Deputy Chairperson of Weverfall Transformation Community. Thanks indeed for joining us at home. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.